About a third of Brits hold anti-Semitic attitudes, and a majority endorse at least one extreme, hardline anti-Israel belief. This is according to a new study from the London-based Institute for Jewish Policy Research. Now, we're going to show you some of the most eye-opening numbers and graphics on your screen, but the point is, the author says his research clearly establishes a link between anti-Semitism and anti-Israel attitudes. This is the largest and most detailed survey of attitudes towards Jews and Israelis ever conducted in Britain, and it suggests widespread general anti-Semitism in the population. And I'm joined now by our UK correspondent, Jonathan Sacerdoti, joining us live in London. Jonathan, what to you stands out about this research? What is the most eye-opening number, and what could be done about it?
Well, Jeff, what's interesting about this research is, as it says, that it tries to empirically show a link between anti-Israel sentiment and anti-Jewish sentiment. So specifically, it points to what they call an elastic view of anti-Semitism, saying that people aren't necessarily anti-Semitic or not anti-Semitic. They might be a little bit anti-Semitic, and that if they look at the statistics, the number of people who agreed with anti-Israel sentiment increased the chances of the same people having anti-Semitic sentiment. But there's been quite a lot of criticism about the separation of the two, because the statements offered to people for agreement or disagreement in terms of anti-Israel are, the report itself admits, to the majority of Jews considered to be anti-Semitic in and of themselves. And if the data is then read accordingly, it shows that those on the left who are otherwise exonerated are actually more likely to be anti-Semitic, as long as you count those anti-Israel statements themselves as anti-Semitic.
But an overwhelming majority of people polled in this research asked about it say, they support Israel's right to exist. They have perhaps a single or general one belief that's anti-Semitic. How consequential is that? I mean, at some level, is everyone a little bit racist or anti-Semitic or has prejudice? I mean, does this have weight? I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, the idea that of all of the UK population in a representative survey, 1 in 3 might agree with one anti-Semitic statement is so concerning to some. This report says it's not concerning because it means they're not very anti-Semitic in this elastic sense that they talk about. Some are criticizing that. But if you look at the actual statements about Israel, which is where the report focuses more, there are things like Israel is committing mass murder in Palestine, or Israel exploits Holocaust victimhood for its own purposes, or Israel is deliberately trying to wipe out the Palestinian population. When you hear statements like that, many in the Jewish community have said to me that they consider agreement with those to be very anti-Semitic, and that that's the problem. The separation of anti-Semitism and what this report refers to as anti-Israel sentiment is an artificial one. Many Jews in the UK say that they feel threatened by those sorts of anti-Semitic, anti-Israel statements.
Those kinds of questions concerning exploiting the Holocaust for gain, the issue of a genocide or mass murder of the Palestinian people, how do you combat that? I mean, this research has some numbers, but is it education? Is it public rallies and speeches and appearances? What happens next to reverse some of these eye-opening numbers?
Part of the problem with targeting that kind of prejudice is that many in the Jewish community can't agree on the problem. So while this report shows numbers and statistics, it uses them to say that there's no increased chance of those on the extreme left being anti-Semitic. Some others say that it shows exactly the opposite, that 80% or so on the extreme left have these anti-Israel opinions that are anti-Semitic. So if the problem can't be agreed on, dealing with a solution becomes increasingly difficult for the Jewish community. However, the government does seem committed to a definition of anti-Semitism called the IHRA definition, which includes criticism of Israel that is on a different level from criticism of other countries, such as those examples given in the survey. And that means that perhaps the government is on the right line in terms of combating anti-Semitism.
And Jonathan, this is a very extensive research, right? This was a groundbreaking in its scope.
Indeed it was, and there seems to have been a lot of research over recent years into anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic feeling within the UK. There have been lots of different reports and lots of different statistics, each with their own pluses and minuses in terms of how representative they might be or how they've been analysed by those carrying them out. Ultimately, it all adds to the data for scholars and generally for members of the public to look at those statistics and decide what they think is the case. But when it comes down to the experience of Jewish people on the street, many do say that they experience anti-Semitism whether it's violent or physical abuse on a building or a person, or whether it's casual abuse in speech. And those are things which Jewish people and those in government wish to see ended across the board.
All right, Jonathan Sacerdoti, live for us in London. Thank you so much for your analysis on this eye-opening report. And